Hey, how's it going? I decided to celebrate a year of doing flavor reviews by promptly not recording anything for YouTube for a week. But we're back. We're going to continue on some Liquid Barn flavors. So today I have my first batch of their cream flavors. We are testing their coconut milk, their creme brulee, their cream, and their fresh cream. Standard disclaimer here applies. Didn't pay for these. Shout out to Liquid Barn for sending them to me. Starting out, I have their coconut milk. This is a really interesting flavor. So when they say coconut milk, that's not necessarily what I'm getting. I am definitely getting the coconut, but it might be splitting hairs. I think I'm getting more of a coconut cream flavor. There's a really sort of heavy waxiness to this flavor that reminds me a lot of like actual coconut oil, or, it's just a little bit too, I want to say rich to be like an actual coconut milk. The coconut here is actually pretty good. You do get that sort of like more realistic coconut cream flavor. It's very soft. It's not particularly assertive. It does feel like there's maybe a little bit of like bolstering going on here. I'd kind of compare it to almost like a good pina colada, like premix, where you have some of that actual coconut, but then you have just a little bit of that kind of suntan lotion, artificial coconut sort of layered in. It tastes a lot like some of the coconut from TPA's coconut candy. It's not really overwhelming for me. I think it definitely still sort of fits in the profile. But the combination of that sort of waxy heaviness and that kind of like fatty, waxy mouthfeel gets a little weird for me. Overall, though, I think it definitely does pretty much taste like coconut cream, which is cool. In addition to that sort of artificial coconut waxy note going on, I do get a little bit of weird spiciness out of this, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that it like tastes dead on for cinnamon, but it has a lot of the same kind of mouthfeel. Like it definitely has almost like a cinnamon spice there without really being able to taste the cinnamon. This flavor does have quite a bit of ethyl alcohol in it, so it might just be that hasn't really sort of steeped off all the way for me. But again, I tested these like with a pretty decent steep on them. I think this one was probably about 4 weeks worth of steep. And I'm still getting a pretty noticeable, like kind of weird cinnamon hit to it. It kind of tastes like a horchata cinnamon, but somebody sort of left out some of the actual dried cinnamon and you're just getting like a cinnamon syrup or something. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just think it might sort of limit the profile a little bit. Liquid Barn suggests mixing this at 7%, which I feel like it maybe is a little bit overboard. I think the actual like coconut oil waxiness here is probably a little overbearing up that high. I'd use this more sort of in the accent range, around 3 to 4%, probably with like another sort of lighter, more neutral cream if you did want to go for the coconut milk route. Flavor Arts Fresh Cream would work really well here. In terms of where you'd actually want to use this, so for tropical fruit mixes, if you want some coconut in there, you usually run into the issue that it can get a little bit dry or weird. I think this would actually help give you some coconut with like some pineapple or some mango or something like that to get a coconut flavor in there that isn't going to be like dry and harsh like Flavor Arts coconut, something like that. It's going to give you a nice sort of boost of coconut flavor and some creaminess in there. I could also see using this at like a really low percentage behind like custards and stuff like that to kind of mimic what TPA's cheesecake graham crust does for creams and custards in general. Add a little bit more richness. You may also be able to get away with using this in some bakeries for like a richer coconut note, like if you're going to make a coconut cream pie or some sort of like weird coconut meringue thing. I could see using this as your bakery coconut note. But yeah, I actually was really impressed by this one. Not so much even that I absolutely love the flavor, but it does do a really sort of heavy coconut without going full on into like butter like Flavorist coconut does. But overall, I think that cinnamon note, more than anything else, is going to be kind of the harder part to work around here. Next, I have Liquid Barn's Creme Brulee. This one's a little hard to pin down for me. So I do get most of the components of an actual creme brulee. You do have a sort of rich custard note here. I definitely say it's pretty heavily eggy. I'm not getting like anything too aggressive in terms of like dairy notes. I don't get much butter. There's no like sort of creamy kind of butyric taste to it at all. But that egg note there is very aggressive. There's a pretty good thickness here, though. Like, it definitely feels like a custard. It has that thicker, denser mouthfeel, so I think it does that part of it pretty well if you don't mind sort of the extra egginess of the custard. The brulee note here is a little bit more hit or miss for me. So I do get like a nice sort of medium dark caramel that is doing the brulee kind of thing, or at least it's bringing in that kind of taste. The caramel itself, definitely not bad. There's nothing too wrong with it. Caramel can get kind of soapy. This doesn't taste too soapy. It doesn't taste burnt. I do get like a little bit of cardboard out of it, but I have that problem with a lot of softer caramel flavors that aren't like, like super dry, hard caramels like Flavor Arts. With the softer stuff, I tend to get just a little bit of cardboard on them. Definitely getting a little bit of that here. So it should kind of work a little bit better than it does for me, because I think the caramel note definitely isn't bad. But there's very little like separation in the flavor, with a creme brulee, with something that complicated. You want like rich custard, and then you want like crispy caramel, and you want to feel like there's a pretty decent separation between the two. That in general is fairly hard to do, but Inaware's creme brulee actually does that really well, and so that's kind of coloring my opinion of this. I think if I hadn't tried Inaware's creme brulee, I'd be a little bit more psyched for this one. I didn't really notice anything too off about this. Like I said, I'm having some issues with separation, but I have had some like reports looking at second opinions, and if you go check like the more detailed Reddit reviews that I do like list out links to second opinions and stuff to make it kind of easier to get other people's opinion, because I may not be the ultimate authority on what stuff is supposed to taste like. But there's some complaint that the custard here tastes a little bit off or a little sour. I'm not necessarily getting that. For me, I think it's mostly just there's a pretty heavy eggy note, and it's doing some weird things with that kind of drier caramel. But I don't taste anything like butyric or rancid. Liquid Barn suggests mixing with this somewhere around 11%. I do feel like that's maybe a little bit overbearing for me. I don't know. For like a creme brulee base, if you were going to be using this, maybe closer to about 8%. With this, I just feel like it gets a little bit too dry, and that caramel gets a little bit cardboardy up above that, around that 11% that they're suggesting. I'd go just a hair lower. I think if you were going to use it as like a creme brulee base, you can go to town with it. There's nothing wrong with it. I think if you go ahead and add something a little bit brighter, or a little bit weirder here, like whether that's more caramel or, I don't know, chocolate. Is chocolate creme brulee a thing, like a chocolate syrup? Or like a brighter fruit or something, as long as you have something else in the mix kind of distracting from sort of the way that texture isn't quite working, I think it's a pretty good choice for a creme brulee. I think it'd go well as like a creme brulee note in like tobaccos and stuff like that, just because you have something else going on a little bit. I think you could also use this as an accent in like other custard flavors to kind of bring in a little bit more egginess and caramel to other like custard or heavy cream flavors. For that, I'd probably be around like 4%. But yeah, overall, I don't know. It suffers a little bit in comparison to Inaware's creme brulee, but I do feel like it's a little bit better than Favore's brulee. I would probably just go with the Inaware creme brulee, but if you have this, it's definitely not bad. Next, I have Liquid Barn's Cream. I'm not in love with this one, but I find it really interesting. So Liquid Barn pitches this as like a whipped cream kind of flavor. And I definitely can get some of that sort of butteriness out of it. It does sort of remind me of the bottom end of a whipped cream. There is a really like heavy buttery mouthfeel to the point where it's almost like tactile in your, like when we say mouthfeel in general, like it's some weird abstracted version of what your sinuses are doing. This actually literally like seems to be kind of filmy and coating my lips and my tongue. So there's some definite richness here, but it doesn't really have a top end for me, which is interesting. Like you get that big heavy hit down low, and then there just isn't anything going on the top of this flavor. It kind of puts it in a weird place for creams, honestly. Like when I think about creams, I really like Favore's cream because it has that weird kind of crazy emulsifying property, but the richness there is definitely sort of more spaced out through the entire vape. It's a little bit more full. This is just a really heavy sort of bottom end richness and not all that much going on up at top. In terms of where you'd use this, It's probably not going to be my first choice for a cream, but I think it could have some really interesting sort of more niche applications. I think it's a good cream for layering. Honestly, if you want the cream in your recipe to stay in exactly one place, right at the bottom of the recipe, I think it will give you a good base to kind of build off. I could see this being a really good cream for like fruit and cream mixes. If you want to go like all artistic and say, well, it's strawberries on top of a bed of whipped cream or whatever other nonsense you want to say. This is going to give you a cream that actually kind of stays where you put it and doesn't go out through the entire vape. If you have a DAP-free cream that you like, but you're finding it's lacking some kind of richness, I could see sort of bringing this in and using it as sort of like a deep low-end richness to kind of boost that cream a little bit. I've been talking about FA's Fresh Cream a lot. Let's just roll with that one. I think a little bit of this together with some FA Fresh Cream would give you like a much richer mouthfeel for a cream that has a little bit more going on the top end. I think you could use it for some bakeries too if you need like a layer of whipped cream on something. I think this is going to work pretty well. Liquid Barn suggests mixing with this at like 6%, which isn't bad. 6% seems about right for actual flavor saturation. It doesn't really work all that well lower than that, but it's 6% with the idea that you're still going to have to add some more cream into here. You're still going to need something to kind of fill in the top end, because you can't just like throw extra flavor at this and have this like magically like fill out your entire flavor. It's going to be really low end heavy even at 6%. But overall, this is, I think, more interesting to me than actually useful. But if you're super into creams, it seems to work a little bit differently than most of the other creams I've tried. So it's definitely interesting. Last for today, I have Liquid Barn's Fresh Cream. Beyond being sort of distressingly pink in the bottle, this doesn't feel all that different to me than Liquid Barn's just normal cream. For the Fresh Cream, they're saying it's like an Italian sweet cream kind of flavor. And I don't necessarily get that. I still get that kind of like fatty, buttery bottom end. That makes me think more of a whipped cream. And like the cream, tends to be suffering from some of those same weird issues where I'm not really getting much in the mid-range of this. I will say it tastes a little bit less rich than the normal Liquid Barn cream. Maybe a tiny bit more dairy, but it's not like TPA's sweet cream where, there's a really heavy sort of butyric, like recognizable like dairy product vibe to it. It still just mostly tastes buttery to me, and I don't get anything too milky or funky to it. I do also pick up some coconut out of this. I say it a lot, but a lot of these kind of creamier flavors have like a little bit of like a coconut twinge to them. This feels like that for me. It feels a lot like the coconut note from like TPA's Cheesecake Graham Crust, where it's not like overwhelming, but if you're looking for it, you'll definitely taste some coconut. But yeah, overall, I'm not really seeing a huge difference between this and the original Liquid Barn cream, so I'm a little bit stumped on that. You're still looking at that same kind of bottom end heavy, rich mouthfeel and just not much going out above that. I still get a little bit of like raw VG sweetness up at the top notes. Liquid Barn suggests mixing this at 7%. Seems to be kind of in the ballpark. I don't know, trying this lower at like 4%, it did seem even thinner. So 7% kind of lets the bottom end of this cohere a little bit. Just repeating myself, I guess. The usage for this is pretty much going to be the same as Liquid Barn's cream. You're going to be looking at layering with it more than anything else. You could also go ahead and use it as a little bit of a cream booster for other creams, but overall, a little bit less sold on this. It doesn't... The Liquid Barn cream reminded me more of a cream flavor than this reminds me of a fresh cream flavor, if that makes any sense whatsoever. That was the first batch of the creamy Liquid Barn flavors. If you're looking at any of these, I hope that was helpful. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll catch you later.